Mantras of our Divine Mother. Our Divine Mother says, turn your mind completely away from your difficulty. Concentrate exclusively on the light, the divine light, and the force, the divine force coming from above. Let the Lord do for your body whatever He pleases. Hand over to Him entirely the entire responsibility of your physical being. With always our love and blessings, says our Divine Mother. Sri Aurobindo's Savitri, Book 6, The Book of Fate, Canto 2, The Way of Fate and the Problem of Pain, page 452. He strives with a giant strength to wrest by force from life and nature the immortal's right. He takes by storm the world and fate and heaven. He comes not to the high world maker's seat. He waits not for the outstretched hand of God to raise him out of his mortality. All he would make his own, leave nothing free, stretching his small self to cope with the infinite, obstructing the God's open ways. He makes his own estate of the earth's air and light. A monopolist of the world energy, he dominates the life of common men. His pain and others' pain he makes his means. On death and suffering he builds his throne. In the hurry and clangor of his acts of might, in a riot and excess of fame and shame, by his magnitude of hate and violence, by the quaking of the world beneath his tread, he matches himself against the eternal's calm and feels in himself the greatness of a God. Power is his image of celestial self. The Titan's heart is a sea of fire and force. He excels in the death of things and ruin and fall. He feeds his strength with his own and others' pain. In the world's pathos and passion he takes delight. His pride, his might call for the struggle and pang. He glories in the sufferings of the flesh and covers the stigmata with the Stoic's name. His eyes, blinded and visionless, stare at the sun. The seeker's sight, receding from his heart, can find no more the light of eternity. He sees the beyond as an emptiness void of soul and takes his night for a dark infinite. His nature magnifies the unreal's blank and sees in naught the sole reality. He would stamp his single figure on the world, obsess the world's rumors with his single name. Words of our Divine Mother taken from the complete works of our Divine Mother books, question and answers of 1953, date 25th March 1953. Quote from the question and answers of 1929 to 31 on 14th April says, Sweet Mother, you have said you must be vigilant and see that you do not use the divine as a cloak for the satisfaction of your desires. For this, our Divine Mother says, many people accept certain theories, some of which are very convenient, and they say everything is the result of the divine will, while others say the divine is everywhere, in everything, and does everything. Yet others say, my will is one with the divine will. It is He who inspires me. Indeed, says our Divine Mother, there are many theories. They say that, and naturally their ego is as alive. They do all that they want to do, saying it is the divine who is doing it in me. Whatever is supplied by their brain is the divine will. It is not a personal inspiration. Everything is the result of the divine will. It is not I who am acting, it is the divine who is acting through me. They do all that they wish to do. There are many people like that. Therefore, I said, do not use the divine as a pretty cloak to hide your desires. Quote from question and answers of 1929 and 1931, again on 14th April 1929. Sweet Mother, there you quoted, the question is to be sincere. If you are not sincere, do not begin doing integral yoga. For this, our Divine Mother says, sincerity is perhaps the most difficult of all things, and perhaps it is also the most effective. If you have perfect sincerity, you are sure of victory. It is infinitely difficult. Sincerity consists in making all the elements of the being, all the moments, whether outer or inner, all the parts of the being, all of them have one single will to belong to the divine, to live only for the divine, to will only what the divine wills, to express only the divine's will, to have no other source of energy than that of the divine. And you find that, says our Divine Mother, and you find that there is not a day, not an hour, not a minute when you do not need to intensify, rectify your sincerity, a total refusal to deceive the divine. So the first thing is not to deceive oneself. The first thing is not to deceive oneself. Our Divine Mother says one knows one cannot deceive the divine. Even the cleverest of the asuras cannot deceive the divine. But even when one has understood that, one sees that quite often in one's life, in the course of the day, one tries to deceive oneself without even knowing it, spontaneously and almost automatically. One always gives favorable explanations for all that one does, for one's words, for one's acts. This is what happens first. I am not speaking of obvious things like quarreling and saying it is others' fault. I am speaking of the very tiny things, tiny little things in everyday life. Our Divine Mother says, I know a child who knocked against a door and he gave a good kick to the door. It is the same thing. It is always the other one who is in the wrong, who has committed the mistake. Even when you have passed the stage of the child, when you have a little reason, you still give the stupidest of all excuses. If he had not done that, I would not have done this. But it should be just the other way around. This is what I call being sincere. When you are someone, if you are sincere, instantaneously, your way of reacting should be to do the right thing, even when you are with someone who does not do it. Take the most common example of someone who gets angry. Instead of saying things that hurt, you say nothing. You keep calm and quiet. You do not catch the contagion of the anger. You have only to look at yourself to see if this is easy. It is quite an elementary thing, a very small beginning to know whether you are sincere. I'm not speaking of those who catch every contagion, even that of a coarse joking, nor of those who commit the same stupidity as the others. Our Divine Mother says, I tell you, if you look at yourself, if you look at yourself with sharp eyes, you will catch in yourself insincerities by the hundred, even though you are trying to be sincere in your general attitude. You will see how difficult it is. I tell you, says our Divine Mother, I tell you, if you are sincere in all the elements of your being, to the very cells of your body, and if your whole being integrally wants the divine, you're sure of victory, but for nothing less than that. That is what I call being sincere. Our Divine Mother says, I am not speaking of glaring things like obeying your impulses, your caprices, and then saying, I do not belong to myself anymore, I belong to the divine. It is the divine who's doing everything in me. It is the divine who's doing everything in me, who's acting in me. That indeed is crude enough. I am speaking of more refined people, a little more noble, who put on a pretty cloak to cover the desires. Our Divine Mother says, how many things in the course of day, how many thoughts, sensations, gestures are turned exclusively towards the divine in an aspiration? How many? I believe if you have a single one in the whole day, you may mark that in red letters. Our Divine Mother says, when I say if you are sincere, you're sure of victory. I mean true sincerity, that is, to be constantly the true flame that burns like an offering. Let me repeat, our Divine Mother says, if you are sincere, you are sure of victory. I mean, true sincerity is to be constantly the true flame that burns like an offering. That intense joy of existing only by the divine and for the divine, and feeling that without him nothing exists. That life has no longer any meaning, nothing has any purpose, nothing has any value, nothing has any interest unless it is this call, this aspiration, this opening to the supreme truth, to all that we call the divine, because you must use some word or other. The only reason for the existence of the universe. Remove that and everything disappears, says our Divine Mother. Next, dated 8th April 1953, quote taken from Question and Answers of 1929-31, 14th April. Our Divine Mother has stated one of the commonest forms of ambition is the idea of service to humanity. All attachment to such service or work is a sign of personal ambition. For this, the child asks the Divine Mother, Sweet Mother, why do you say that this is ambition? For this, our Divine Mother says, why do you want to serve humanity? What is your idea? It is ambition. It is in order to become a great man among men. It is difficult to understand. I understand. I can see that. For this, the child says, the divine is everywhere. So if one serves humanity, one serves the divine. Isn't that so? For this, our Divine Mother says, that's marvelous. The clearest thing in this matter is to say, the divine is in me. If I serve myself, I am also serving the divine. And our Divine Mother smiles and says, in fact, the divine is everywhere. The divine will do his own work very well without you. I see quite well that you do not understand, but truly, if you do understand that the divine is there in all things, With what are you meddling in serving humanity? To serve humanity, you must know better than the divine what must be done for it. Do you know better than the divine how to serve it? Our Divine Mother says, the divine is everywhere. Yes, things don't seem to be divine. As for me, I only see one solution. If you want to help humanity, there is only one thing to do it. It is to take yourself as completely as possible and offer yourself to the divine. That is the solution. Because in this way, at least the material reality which you represent will be able to grow a little more like the divine. We are told that the divine is in all things. Why don't things change then? Because the divine does not get a response. Everything does not get responded to the divine. One must search the depths of the consciousness to see this. What do you want to do to serve humanity? Give food to the poor? You can feed millions of them. That will not be a solution. This problem will remain the same. Give new and better living conditions to men? The divine is in them. How is it that things don't change? The divine must know better than you the condition of humanity. What are you? You represent only a little bit of consciousness and a little bit of matter. It is you that you call myself. If you want to help humanity, says our Divine Mother, if you want to help humanity, the world or the universe, the only thing to do is to give that little bit of yourself entirely to the divine. Why is the world not divine? It is evident that the world is not in order. So the only solution to the problem is to give what belongs to you. Give it totally, entirely to the divine. Not only for yourself, but for humanity, for the universe. There is no better solution. How do you want to help humanity? You don't even know what it means. Perhaps you know still less what power you are serving. How can you change anything without indeed having changed yourself? Our Divine Mother says, in any case, you are not powerful enough to do it. How do you expect to help another if you do not have a higher consciousness than he? It is such a childish ideal. It is children who say, I am opening a boarding house. I am going to build a crèche. I am going to give soup to the poor. Preach this knowledge, spread this religion. It is only because you consider yourself better than others. Think you know better than they what they should be or do. That's what it is. Serving humanity. You want to continue all that? It has not changed things much. It is not going to help humanity that one opens a hospital or a school. For that the child says, all the same it has helped, hasn't it? If all the schools were abolished, for this our Divine Mother again smiles and says, I don't think that humanity is happier than it was before, nor that there has been a greater improvement. All this mostly you, the feeling I am something, that is what is called ambition. There are people who are ready to give money for the schools. They were told that there was a divine work to be done, that the divine has decided to do it in that particular way. Even if they are convinced that it is indeed the divine's work, they refuse to give anything, for this is not recognized form of beneficence. One does not have the satisfaction of having done something good. There will always be between you and the divine, the him, the conscious ego of one's own intellectual superiority, which judges the divine and is sure of never being mistaken. For they are convinced that if they had made the world, they would not have committed all the stupidities that God had perpetrated. And all this comes from pride, vanity, self conceit. And there is exactly the seed of that in people who want to serve humanity. In fact, the first human being that concerns you is yourself. You want to diminish suffering, but unless you can change the capacity of suffering into a certitude of being happy, the world will not change. It will be the same. We turn in a circle, our civilization follows another, one catastrophe after another, but the thing does not change, for there is something missing, something not there. That is the consciousness, that's all. It is not yoga you are doing if you're serving humanity. You believe you're doing something great, and that's all. It's a personal satisfaction. But for this to act effectively, at times, centuries are necessary. It is a question of proportion. You can try it out, and it is more difficult. And even with those around you, you must be absolutely sincere. Not to do with the idea of getting a result, but because you want to gain a victory. If you gain it, it is necessarily having an effect on those around you. But if a bargaining element is mixed up in it, if you do this because you want to get that other, I want to overcome my defects, but that person must always overcome his, then that does not work. It's a merchant's attitude. I gave this, I shall take this. That spoils everything. There is neither sincerity nor purity, it is bargaining. Nothing must be mixed with your sincerity. Nothing must be mixed with your sincerity, your aspiration, and your motive. You do things for the love of the divine. You do things for the love of truth. You do things for the love of perfection without any other motive, any other idea, and that brings the results, says our divine mother. Prayers and Meditations, June 4th, 1914. O thou who triumphest over all obstacles, thou shalt be in us the victory over all that would be an obstacle to the accomplishment of thy divine law. Thou wilt dispel the darkness of ignorance and the black smoke of egoistic ill will. Thou wilt dissolve all wrong suggestions and strengthen in us a pure and clear vision and the perspicacity which does not let itself be deceived by disruptive thoughts and conflicting wills for disorder. O my sweet Master, thy infinite love is the reality of our being. Who can struggle against its all powerful action? It penetrates everything. It passes through every obstacle, whether it be the inertia of a heavy ignorance or the resistance of an uncomprehending ill will. O my sweet Master, through and by this love, thou shinest resplendent in all things, and the splendor of thine, ever increasing in its force, shall radiate its action over all the earth and become perceptible to every consciousness. Who can resist thy divine power? Thou art the sole and supreme reality. My being is ingathered in a mute adoration, and everything disappears that is not thou.